Well, here we are back on the Crownwheel carrier, or the diff of the Massey Ferguson 65. And look, this has been apart for quite a while. I got onto other things in life, sold my business and mucked around. Anyway, we're back in the shed playing. So look, what I'd like to do, I've got all these gears cleaned up. I've bathed everything up, the thrust washers, the gears, the whole lot. So I'll just get going with a little bit of grease, and these thrust washers that sit down behind the gears, I always just like to put a bit of grease on them, and just to, well look, it just holds them in place, make sure they've got a bit of oil, a bit of lubricant for there when they get started. Now, this gear here, the long one, he goes on the Crownwheel side, and look, I just put a bit of grease there too. This gear's got a little bit of wear in it, but look, for what we're doing, I'm not going to worry too much about that. It's okay for our show tractor. It's got a couple of marks on the gears, but they're all good. I'm not going to get too concerned. Now, this fella here, so what you have here is, we'll pop it apart. So you have your main cross piece, your spider, I suppose. I'm not sure the correct words for it. So we'll just put once again, just a little bit of grease, and you can put oil, but I just, if it takes a while to get the final drives done, this little bit of grease will sit with us. So we slide the gears on, and a little bit of grease on the thrust washers too. Now these are spherical thrusts, and these are worn a little bit, but look, they're not bad. I'm happy to run them. And I suppose a word of warning from when I was a younger bloke, I bought some of these off Sparex and some of the aftermarket people, and you'll see this is a nice brass colour there. They're a bit of a coppery colour, and I never actually, look, I noticed it, but the penny didn't drop for me. And I did a friend's tractor with them, as a customer, a paying job with it. And like sometime later, and not that long later, he said, oh look, I've got a couple of bits of metal in the oil. And when we come back to it to have a look, I realised that what had happened is the aftermarket thrusts were too coppery, and just with the normal use of the tractor, these had sort of hammered out and pushed out. I'll just bring you around there a little bit. And yeah, they'd hammered out, so never again have I ever used a non-genuine spherical thrust. Now, make sure you've got a bit of backlash here. Now, that backlash there, look, that's a little more than I'd like, but and that's because of the wear on the bottom gear and a bit of wear here because we're using second-hand gears. But look, that's just what I've chosen to do. I'm happy with that. And this other gear, there's a little bit of wear there, you can just feel it. These are this colour because I actually bead blasted them ages ago. They had little bits of surface rust on them, and I didn't like that, so I cleaned it all off. So we'll get a little bit more grease, we'll get another thrust, and away we go. So now when we bring the top on, you might notice over here we've got like the bearings. This is the bearing for the back side. This is the bearing here for this side. And just a word of advice. This bearing here goes on this housing here that where the diff lock goes. But if you make a mistake and put that bearing on first, then you can't get to the nuts that hold the whole show together. So you can't go getting excited and put the bearing on. Everything has to have its order. Now, on the Crownwheel carrier on mine, there's some numbers, and I've got 2 centre pop marks that I put on there and there. So it's important, I'll just put the lid on this grease, and it's important to find those marks on the top section here, and there they are there, and make sure they all line up. And that way you know it's going back together in the order that it was machined. I might put a little bit of grease on this bush up in here. I haven't done one of these in many, many years. So if we bring that down there, and now we can pop this on. Now, look, I don't know if I marked this back in the day. I don't see why I would have, but you never know. Sometimes when I'm marking things, I get a bit excited. But look, that looks okay. We're not going to worry about that. Now, all of these bolts, they have a hole in them for the wire to go through, lock bolts. Now, these are half UNC, so I've run a die down each bolt here, and I've actually cleaned all the threads out down the bottom here as well. So they should just go and start nice and easy for us. So that's got them all lined up. I'll bring you up a little bit, not that bloody much, thanks. And we have to tension these up, so we're going to pop a little bit of oil on them. That's just a bit of old engine oil I had left over. You don't need to be too excited about what you do there. Feels a bit tight, that one. They're a snug fit, that's for sure. A 13/16 spanner fits on top of these. That one there seems to need a bit of help. Seem to be a couple of different heights in them when you see the bolts. I don't think that's got anything major to do with anything. Just making sure all these are started. This has been on my bench for a long time, so it's good to actually get back on the 65. I've done a lot since our last video on it, but hopefully I can stay with it for a while now. You can see that just pulling down that little bit. I'll do the opposite bolt. Then we'll go 90. This old cheap spanner, I don't know what brand it is. Super Tool. So probably from Super Cheap Auto in Australia here. It's pretty fat on the sides and it doesn't want to sit down the bottom, so I'll persist with this for a little bit and then we'll get the proper socket and we'll get stuck into it. I just want to make sure it's all pulled down evenly before we start tensioning anything. I don't like rattling nuts or bolts down when we're putting things together. Once they're started, I suppose it wouldn't matter, but I'm not in a hurry. You can actually feel through the side there for a bit of backlash, so. So that feels like it's all pulled down nicely. Some of these are still tight. I'll just grab a 13/16 and a ratchet. So a ratchet, that's a Caterpillar long socket I bought years ago. And the old ratchet, yeah, I've had it for a long time. Okay, I'll grab the manual, I'll find the torque setting, and we'll just click them up, and then we'll try and wire them, go around and wire them all. And you wire them in pairs, like these two get wired together, those two, and it's just a figure eight so they can't come undone. And you can see now that once that bearing would go on, that yeah, you can't get to them. So it's important to get all that done before you get too excited with bearings. So, all right, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've had a look in the manual, 85 foot-pound to these bolts. And the other thing I noticed while I was having a look is these little spider gears that go on the shaft there. It said if you're replacing one, replace them all, so you have even load on everything. So that's okay, I can deal with that. So what we need to do now is try and hang on to this, and I'm just trying to do crossovers, make sure it's all pulled down even. I have to come around here. So just running around here checking them. Okay, now as with these tension wrenches, when you finish doing what you're doing, back them off. Take the load off the spring. All right, so that's good. Now, what we need to do is just get this little bar in here, make sure everything's turning around nicely. You can see I can turn that by hand. So look, I think that's good. I'll find a little bit of wire now and we'll run through tying a couple of these up just to show you what I like to do there. Okay, what I'm using here is a little bit of welding wire, and if we just run it through there, push him through the hole here. If we bring this one this way, that one that way. So I've got it so if this goes to undo, it can't. If this one goes to undo, it's pulling straight down there. And this one's tight there, so I just like to chop him off. There. And flatten it out. So you can see that there. So I'll go and do all the rest, and yeah, I'll come back in a little while. Well, there you go, that's all that tidied up. Now, what I'd like to show you is on the back here. Now, whoever had this Crownwheel off years ago, now this was a cane haul-out tractor, so it's had the arse worked out of it. You can see they've tensioned the bolts and they've put a couple of centre pop marks there. So I didn't undo that. I thought, well, that's not going anywhere. But you can see that there's a bearing here, and what I did to get the bearing out is I just got the welder, I run a weld inside the bearing. Looks like chook shit, but that's fine. Looks like a flock of seagulls flew across it. But look, what that does, when it cools, just weld it and let it cool, and you can see that bearing now is quite loose in that ball. So that's how I got that out without getting bars in and, you know, buggering up all around the back here. So what I can do now is put a bit of oil on there, pop that bearing in, and I'll probably just punch that bearing in. We'll try and lube the bore a little bit. A bit of oil's always a good thing. And if we sort of I'm sort of hitting on the outside edge there, but I'll grab a brass punch and finish putting it home. So the brass punch is just so we don't do any damage to the bearing. I suppose the other thing we could do is put it in the freezer. Hey, hang on to it, Liam. That's how excited I am to be working on this again. And you can hear that's changed note. So that bearing is sitting in nice and tight. I could have pressed that in, but the reason I didn't is this getting bloody heavy and I'm getting old. Yeah, look, that's good. We'll pop him over. I won't be able to put this in for a little while. I've got to get the axle housings ready and things like that. So, but at least having something else done is always good. Okay, that's on. Now, on this bearing on the back there, sometimes there's shims there to help with the backlash, but until we get the housings done, which is the plates, there's a plate comes on here that receives this bearing, there's a plate on the other side that takes this bearing, and until we get them on, we won't know how our backlash and all that's going with our pinion. I've set it up with the same shims as before, but yeah, things change. These bearings might just be a little bit different, something like that. And the plates that bolt on here where the bearings go, they have the surface for your dry brakes on the outside, and then your trumpet housing goes on there. So there you go. That's going to do this video. That's just assembling the diff centre. Like I say, it'll be a little while before we get to putting this in. We'll cover him up with rags and try and keep it nice and tidy and keep the dust out while we do the final drives, and then we can probably come back and put the whole thing together. So there you go. That's assembling a Crownwheel carrier.